temporary happiness from time to time. But these would be sort of unstable and short-lived. And then, right, they would return to that kind of naturally dissatisfied state. Yeah, sorry. I just want to, now that we're streaming, Geshe likes to see everybody, so I'll just get rid of that notification box and we'll be all good. Sorry, folks. So actually, we should understand that based upon the roots that we have, based upon the potentials we have, that this kind of change is possible, that we may start out difficult, dissatisfied, depressed, and so forth. But through the practice of meditation, through cultivating the teachings, we can actually improve the situation and get better and better. It's very important to have confidence in this. So if we look at the intersection of Buddhism and science, right, it's clear that this change is possible. And it's also important to understand that that change doesn't depend on youth, right? So it can be possible at different ages. And also that change doesn't necessarily isn't ruled out by maybe in the beginning being a difficult or dissatisfied person, right? It's clear that with this gradual cultivation, that with this practice, that the change is possible. So seeing, right, that this change in the mind was possible and that it contributed to happiness even on the temporary level, right? Then the scientists, they were kind of like really impressed, and they thought, wow, this meditation is something that is useful. It can be useful for everybody from spiritual to business people, right? Whereas before, right, the kind of connection between sort of spiritual and scientific people, this was not so good. And maybe 20 or 30 years ago, they thought that meditation was like a little bit weird or something not useful or something like that. So if we just kind of think in this way and have this awareness, we should understand that we've got all of these wonderful things, right, to change our situation in the positive. That's really important to keep in point. So then if we look outside to our external environment, right, we can see various fruit trees and their seeds, right? So we have like apple seeds, orange seeds, and so forth. And similarly, there also might be kind of poisonous plants, thorny plants, and so forth. And we understand that these also arise from the particular seed. And so just as there are those seeds in the external outer environment, also within us, within our minds, we have many seeds. And some of those are wholesome, right? And some of them are unwholesome as well. So our task really is to be able to first identify which seeds are wholesome and which seeds are unwholesome, to gradually clear away the unwholesome seeds within our mind and to plant more seeds for what is wholesome and beneficial. And having planted it, right, also water and fertilize it so that we can experience positive results. And also realize that having the seeds there is not enough. They have to be planted, watered, and fertilized, Geshe said. Just like if he had some apple seeds and he threw them in the drawer there beside him, those apple seeds wouldn't be able to do much good, right? We certainly wouldn't experience a tree and fruit from them. So also that's important to keep in mind. So understand too that as we engage in these activities together, right, we're always planting those seeds, the seed for liberation, the seed for bodhicitta, the seed for our eventual enlightenment. And if we remember what we're doing, this will help us proceed in the practice happily. Again. And also, if we understand these seeds that we are planting, then we understand that all of our interactions with people are positive. There is no bad person. Every single person is close to us and beneficial. And so we understand too that negative actions, right? These negative actions, those are what really must be abandoned, and we try to mitigate or stop those when we can. But we understand that the compulsion of that doesn't take away from the sentient being. So we still have the love, we still have the compassion for that sentient being. And actually, when we think about our internal seeds compared to the seeds in the outer environment, it's actually easier to sprout those internal seeds, because think about our world, how it is today, right? How many countries are lacking enough water, or maybe they have too much, and because of drought and flood, they plant those seeds that never sprout. Within us, if we nourish them, we can sprout our seeds easily. So we have actually the water and the fertilizer accessible to us by way of our cultivation and practice. So whether these seeds of realization sprout or not, whether our mind becomes happier or not, that's something that depends upon us. It's not something that we can point outwards to. And so Chandrakirti said that actually, while we have this human rebirth, this is the time that we have the complete freedom, the complete facility to do this. So that is something to really pay attention to. So understanding all of these, the potentials and so forth, then we proceed with a happy and joyful mind. And right, to plant those seeds, we need a good kind of ground that is even, peaceful, and so forth. So let us take a moment to establish that peaceful state in body and mind. All phenomena are empty like the sky. If I try to find some pinpointable, inherently existent essence, I will not be able to find it. So contemplate, relax your mind by resting in that sky-like emptiness. So think all of the thoughts that were circulating in our mind and maybe distracting us. these are kind of cleared away, just like the water particles in the sky are evaporated by the sun. So I think that through all of these contemplations, then, these are for establishing the peacefulness of the body and mind. My body and mind are still and at peace. So then we'll practice a little bit the 4 foundations of mindfulness here, and not paying attention to any other thoughts. Just rest your mind upon the body, not forcefully, but just observe the body and what's happening there. Going from the top of the head to the bottom of our body, check in with those various parts. What feelings or sensations are arising there? When we observe the feelings on the surface or our outer body, what are those feelings like? When we go a little bit deeper and observe those feelings and sensations within our body, what are those like? Going a little bit deeper into this contemplation beyond the feelings, let's contemplate our body and think, from what causes did this body arise? From what causes? Okay. So think about this body and the causes that gave rise to it. And in terms of those causes, is this body really something to be attached to then or not? So if we think about its coarser cause from the point of view of this life, this body arose from the reproductive substances of our father and mother. If those are the main causes of this body, there's something temporary, not pure. So then we shouldn't grasp or be attached to this physical form too much. And if we go beyond those physical constituents of our parents, and we think about the main root causes from the subtle point of view, This is karma, and deeper than that, affliction. It's karma and affliction that lead to the arising of this body. If we understand that this body is samsara, it's in the nature of samsara, we understand that it is also a kind of a basis for the arising of many problems. And in this way, we shouldn't be excessively attached to our physical form. As we abide within samsara, as long as we abide here, these are the causes of our body, and others who abide within samsara, these are also the causes of their body. And therefore, that excessive attachment and that attitude of self-cherishing doesn't really make much sense. So if one were to say, well, does that mean that this body is something that's disregarded, that it's not useful at all? No, because if we look at the other side of things, at its benefits, we could also make the argument that the body needs to be protected because it can be the basis of good things. Because if we use this body correctly, it can be like a boat that carries us across the water. It can be used to accumulate wholesome causes of both temporary and ultimate happiness. This body, if we accumulate the proper causes, it can become a source of benefit for both ourselves and others. So let's make heartfelt requests to the holy beings to be able to do that. We'll pause there. Sorry, yeah, no gong today, no gong today. Ba jom den de jin je ba dra jom ba yon da ba zo be song ye re ba dang sha zu dem ba de war she ba je den gem ba ge bu du e ka lo gyur wa la na me ba la da mi nam gi tem ba zong ge jom den de pe gya wa sha gya du ba la cha se lo
Jede Gyalse Ji O Tenpa Chomden de Dejin Sheba Da Chompa Yang Daba Zobe Sanje Reba Dang Shasu Tenpa Dewa Sheba Shiden Chempa Chebu Dewe Kalo Gyorwa Lana Meba Ladang Minamgi Tenpa Sangye Chomden de Bejawa Shakya Tubala Chazelo Chede Gyalse Ji O Tenpa Chomden de Tejin Sheba Drachomba Yandaba Zobe Sanje Reba Dang Shazu Tenpa Dewa Sheba Shiden Chemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Lada Minamgi Tenpa Sangye Chomden de Pejawa Shakya Tubala Chazelo Chede Gyalse Ji. We'll do a short mandala. Soji Begi Joshi Medo Ram Ri Ralinji Nidegembadi Sangye Jindu Medebuai Drogun Hama Dajima Chebarjo Idam Guru Ratna Mendala Niryatayami. Refuge and Bodhicitta. Chedon Sogi Chenam La Jangchu Bardu Dani Gyalse Chi Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sonangi Jola Benjir Sange Jobar Sho Chedon Sogi Chenam La Jangchu Bardu Dani Gyalse Chi Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sonam Gi Jola Benji Sange Jobar Sho Chedon Sogi Chenam La Jangchu Bardu Dani Gyalse Chi Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sonam Gi Jola Benji Sange Jobar Sho.
뭐야 다 배워가디 저거이나요 다 시프게 민지 사베다바 무지지가 다 보게 민지 사베다바 있는 다 자와 코로메이 자다 강가 드는 조야 매바 미지 비아레.
So we should think as we engage in our accumulation of virtue or positive potential today, that we are planting seeds for medicinal plants. And when those medicinal plants grow, every part, the roots, the leaves, and the so forth, are something that benefit us.
다된 노지들은 노라요 시스템 사회 춘주질라 때는 시두자 첨부 하려야겠냐서 뭐 용어 되와서 된 노지 농게 사회이나 추주질라 때는 다 누구도야 매바 지가 알세가.
So just like from that small seed, a beautiful tree with a trunk full branches and leaves can grow. In the same way, the seeds for what is positive that we're planting today, these can ripen and bloom into wonderful qualities.
다 레바 야버디와 이사 다 레바 데르다 크로페 세 니바 차중하는 거야. 더 사회 다 도요하네.
So our human brain and intelligence, it is like the field which can bring those seeds that we plant to a kind of full fruition or harvest.
다들이지는 다 깨져 먹으면 사건은 되겠던데 이 돈에 다 내내진 않는 거야.
So let us establish our motivation to do this, and we will just take a few moments to establish that motivation.
뉴아지 찬용 받으시나 다 되네 될라 되네 르도 되네 더도 되네 리강가 되고 있는 거래서 맞지.
So we want to kind of bring a sense of calm, which brings the four elements within our body into balance, which brings the wind, the blood pressure, everything into balance. So just relax for a moment.
대요. 실은도 와도 노는도 와다 미시자지 소소스미 템보 진행다 통일한 틀리지도 맞지.
So here's the challenge. Try to keep a focused attention on the inhalation and exhalation of the breath for a count of 21, and try not to let your mind wander to any thoughts. So 21. I just was telling Geshe, make sure to give enough time so you can count to 21. And don't start to suddenly breathe heavily or suddenly breathe softly. Just breathe according to your normal habit.
소와 초매가 너도 초매가 쉬는 때 나주주의는 저쪽에 말아와 스테노지 손도
Any maybe perturbing, upsetting feelings or thoughts that are arising, don't pay them any heed, and then they'll just be like tiny minnows, tiny fish under the surface of the water. They can't cause any waves.
소와 초매가 너도 초매가 딜레가면이다 너 굉장히야다 이노스
Any feelings, thoughts, projections that are unwholesome or upsetting, think that these dissolve back into the stillness of the mind, just like a rainbow dissolves into the sky. Turn back to that count of 21.
이도 세마도 만들어왔다 시와 렐레 좌송선
So think through these exercises, this contemplation, then the body and the mind, they are more calm than they were before. Yeah.
대응하로서 나세야 돼 셈세야 돼 파야 실지 따와기나 아니 소소다 파녀사금마 던도 되니 집에 로아리 두게 생제 유도 강가로로 이다고 자치문 소바지.
So let's go beyond that self or that I and turn our attention outwards, first to those beings that are close to us, then to those that are maybe a little bit further away, and then think that we are contemplating all 6 types of sentient beings within samsara. Thinking about their qualities bring forth that mind of affectionate love that sees all of them as attractive, as beautiful, as positive. And think every person, every being that I gaze upon, they are somebody who is close to me and kind to me. There's not one single one that is an enemy, even if they appear difficult. I think because every single one of those migrators, of those beings that wander to samsara, is immeasurably close to me, I want to help them in the best way. So for their sake, I will achieve Buddhahood, full enlightenment. The Buddha, Tara, our lamas, our realized teachers, and the Yidams, our meditation deities. All of them have achieved that enlightenment specifically for our sake, so that they can bestow their blessings to help us achieve their goals. So think I have their help. So understanding that then, in a joyful and relaxed way, I will proceed in my practice. Geshe said that I whispered to him, you didn't give them enough time to get to 21. Did you guys get enough time? Were people able to count to 21? No, I see, sort of. Anyways, but hopefully, did you hear the chime when I rang it? Did the microphone pick that up? You did. Okay. Well, that's one win then.
Yeah,
so Geshe said maybe he didn't give you enough time, right? But hopefully he gave you the pointers of how to actually do the practice, right? So when you're at home in your normal place, then you know the kind of steps and the methods that you can try to kind of still the mind to prepare it for meditation. And there's also the method, right, not of counting, that might not work for you. There's just the method of also just placing the bare attention on the rising and falling of the breath. And also we did a contemplation of the body, and we hopefully did that mindfulness, that contemplation in a way that can a little bit address this problem of attachment to the body. And so, of course, Geshe has taught extensively on the 4 close placements or the 4 foundations of mindfulness before, right? So those teachings are available like on our YouTube and stuff. If you want to. So as we proceed in the text, think about all of the seeds that we've planted. And then the instructions that we're going to look at today, we can think of these as like a rain that is going to help those seeds to sprout and grow. Yes.
쟁에 쇼주로 저와들 그조 쇼주 세계톤에 저와 제도 대도 쇼주 세계톤에 저와 니가는 다 대도 쇼주 세계 저와 같이 디아레스.
So in terms of where we are in the text, we're on the section about taking adversity or taking obstacles into the path. And we covered the point about using relative bodhicitta to take obstacles into the path. And also now we are talking about using ultimate bodhicitta to transform obstacles into the path.
어다 요다 노아 강가로로 동반이 같은 천홍이 바테 다파 좀 맞아야 그냥 같이 볼 수 있는 거예요.
And we also did a meditation where all of the appearances, they are kind of dissolving into emptiness as a powerful way to kind of handle or transform adversity, right?
리송아 어다 되게 상점하게 되시와.
로송아서
더 년보도 자니 소송이
쇼장 가자긴 sorry.
쇼조 덤바야.
알레 딱 냠보.
저 같은
알레 딱 냠보당.
더 년보도 자니 년몽바 시와 맞춰와란 디 때비 라마고 손지지 저와 인연의 솜. 그래서 같이 뭐지?
딱 냠보당 자네 냠몽바 케바 맞춰. Yeah, nga indicate hako gure moto gen. Sorry, I'm a little bit lost in the text today. Just give me one moment. Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Sorry. So we are here. Sorry. So we're page 9, the second paragraph. So whatever harms us also proves to be very kind, since it inspires our training in the 2 types of bodhicitta. So here's where Geshe started. The harm doer highlights how we are without an antidote and how we fail to notice the onset of the mental afflictions.
Yep. Only tig sell to cover never thought that tissue mandoache. Oh, that Latin Yambo Karayamba. Oh, no Karayamba, so Jesuna.
So actually, when an obstacle arises, rather than kind of turning outwards and just focusing on what's happening externally, if we can turn our focus inwards, right, and we can see maybe how this is arising, what kind of appearance is arising, and try to think about it in a way that can act as an antidote to the afflictions, then we won't be separated from the antidote. So then we come to the next one. So they are like an emanation of the teacher or the Buddha. So Geshe is explaining this line in that it's really not easy, but if we can see the difficult person as a manifestation of an enlightened being or of our spiritual teacher who is trying to train us in the path, then that's really beneficial. So actually in the text, it talks about how the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, right? They can manifest in myriad ways, right? They can emanate beings that are pleasing, they can emanate beings that are very difficult or that we may see as negative, all for the purpose of our training in bodhicitta and so forth. So Geshe is thinking specifically of the teachings on Mother Tantra. And so, for example, there is actually a general tantric vow about not disparaging women. So why do we not disparage women? It explains in the commentaries on this vow or precept that amongst those women, many of them could be emanations of an enlightened being such as Vajrayogini. So if we denigrate women, right, we are possibly denigrating holy beings. So that's sort of a practical application of this instruction.
manito서로 봐.
Mhm.
뭐이사래다.
Yeah.
아사라세 하고서로.
Uh.
다 되네 대니 콜로다 조조 시에니라.
Yeah.
하고서로.
Chiola.
조질.
George Ale, sorry.
많이 대니 하고서로.
Ale, los.
아니 배워라지가 가냐 할래비 뒤자다니라. 여러시.
Ale.
조지 할래비 다치 못 쓰고 왔어.
Tico machenre, machina.
야 마시.
Yeah. So Geshe is remembering the story of Atisha's companion. I think it was Atisha's cook, right? And he would be really difficult with Atisha and would sometimes speak to Atisha kind of like very rudely and in a very provoking way. And so, when they were in Tibet, a lot of the Tibetan followers of Atisha saw him in a very poor light, like they thought he was a bad person.
다 대지마 드니테니 둔도를 조지가 자치 못으니 배 체대지도 유니와스.
So when the cook passed away, actually Atisha commissioned for a beautiful reliquary stupa, right? A monument to be constructed for him. And it was because that cook or that difficult person, he acted as a condition for Atisha to be able to cultivate his patience and protect it. So he was really somebody who helped him to proceed in the path. Yeah. So that's how we can practice too, right? We have all kinds of different people that are around us and that we encounter. And if some of those ones who are maybe a little bit difficult or provoking, we see them also as extremely beneficial because those are the people that allow us to cultivate patience, right? This can be a very effective way of transforming. And also remember what we need in order to be able to do this effectively. So Geshe said in our talk yesterday, he mentioned mindfulness and introspection, and how with mindfulness and introspection, one of the really good things is that even if we have a negative thought, because of mindfulness and introspection, we'll be able to just stop it at a thought before it becomes speech or an action, right? So taming the sense doors or subduing the sense doors. This is kind of a what is it when like somebody like tells you have to, is that an admonition? It's an admonition, right? It's an admonishment, sorry. It's an admonishment to that you'll find in the Lamrim in the stages of the path teaching. So just to go back to the original point about in terms of the emanations of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, various holy beings, and so forth, they can manifest as any type of person, including poor or seemingly humble people. They can manifest as any of these 6 types of sentient beings. So because of that, it's another reason to, as much as possible, train in that thought which holds beings as close to us. So we go back to the text here. Should you undergo intense suffering as a result of a serious illness like leprosy, think, were it not for this suffering, I would be caught up in preparations for this life. But this has caused me to remember the Dharma when I had failed to do so. It must therefore be the activity of the Guru and the 3 jewels. So leprosy is the example that is given here because, of course, leprosy is a very visible illness, right? The skin and the extremities can degenerate. So it's an illness that others can perceive very directly. So it also leads to, I guess, delatenic halepit natsa mi chasama tongtu gyutsang kongso kare.
Sorry, got
less. Yeah. So Geshe said, because of the visibility of this illness, right, this is something that really stops a person who suffers from this from being able to connect with others, right? There's like, I guess we could say a lot of stigma about it. So there's many stories actually of people who were suffering from leprosy who, it was a very difficult circumstance. Not only is there this disease, but there's also the isolation. They're not supposed to kind of interact with others. And there was a story of one man who really was able to see that, oh, actually, this circumstance is a manifestation of the teacher. And according to that kind of awareness, he practiced Lojong, the mind training teachings, and eventually was completely healed from the leprosy. So actually, one way of referring to the Tonglen and the Lojong teachings is the leprosy clearing teachings, because many people suffering from that disease, they were kind of miraculously healed through cultivating it. Yeah. So this dharma of leprosy, it was called that because it was what allowed those beings to be healed when they cultivated. So the principle here, of course, is when we experience adversity, when we experience these difficulties, not to allow those to become something that has us fall into affliction, but instead to try to transform that situation into something that can train our mind.
So
Geshe says, he's realizing that this is not easy, right? To have a really difficult situation like a serious illness and see that as a manifestation of the three jewels, right? That is something that is challenging. So actually, we talk about seeing them also, these illnesses and these difficulties, as manifestations of enlightened activity. So how can we make sense of that? Well, if those difficulties act as a cause for us to cultivate positive minds, such as patience, to completely transform our mind and to draw closer to enlightenment, doesn't it make sense to see them as manifestations of enlightened activity then? So around Dharamsala in northern India, there are many great meditators. And one of these meditators was reflecting that if he had just spent his time in retreat studying and meditating on the texts, he would have become a great scholar. But if it were not for experiencing illness, he would have become perhaps a prideful scholar. But from experiencing an extreme illness while in retreat, he really had to apply the texts he was looking at, the meditations he was doing as instructions. And because of that circumstance, he really experienced a transformation and he wasn't in danger of falling into pride.
다 된다고 이는 다 나자 단다된 무지레스. 쟁에 돌아샤다고 다 된내서 된대요.
Yeah. So that's really an example of the application of this instruction, taking a difficult circumstance as an aid in the path, as an assisting factor in the path.
데모려워서 로주 가제 슈처런도나 나자처럼도 좋은 로소나. 근데 배를 빼친 뭐지야. 좀 매를 쇼소나. 좀 멤버소나.
멤버소나.
다 메세야 맨도야.
Yeah. 이람성 메조게.
좀 매쇼소나.
Ale, chume shoso나.
좀 멤버소나.
Yeah.
다 메세야 메야마레스.
So, of course, there is a danger, right, that if we don't think in this way, that the study can become a cause of pride. Mesea gidze di chure.
소설 깨져 싸워서. 매치 봐서나. 멤버소나. 멤버소야 철르는 맨도 그러와.
Yeah.
하고서 어떤 매대만 슈르도야 철러왔죠.
Yes. Yeah.
저 그런 멤버소나.
Yeah, ale. Okay, sorry. I think I understood it. I am not sure I get the analogy, but I understood the words at least. So if we think of water and fire, and you pour water upon the fire, this puts the fire out. But if the water you're pouring turns into fire, then this just adds to the fire. That's what I understood. So I guess like the antidote becomes like the bad thing.
다 된다 가르세요. 노치고 로주 때 가져도 되지만 과야 나와.
Right. Geshe said this is an old example. It's ningba. So that's the danger of okay. My apologies, folks. So that's the danger. Yes, Hako-san. That's the danger, right, of pride, that it can turn that dharma practice, which is like supposed to be like the water that puts the fire of afflictions out, into fire itself. So we study, right? We study the teachings to act as antidotes to afflictions, including pride. So if our study or our knowledge becomes the basis for the arising of pride, that's really incongruous, right? It doesn't make sense. So you may notice when Geshe first sits down on the teaching seat, right? Before the teaching, he actually snaps his fingers before sitting fully on the throne. And he said that the snap of the fingers is a warning to himself that this situation here of sitting on this high seat and teaching, this is something that is impermanent, right? It's not necessarily static. And that helps to reduce pride, because we understand like it's not something to be proud of to be sitting on the teaching seat, because it's a condition, it's a situation that could be very temporary. So when we speak about these difficult circumstances being manifestations of the enlightened activity of the Buddha, when we talk about different types of enlightened activity, one list gives 27 types. And if you want to look those up, you can find them in the Abhisamayalankara, or the Ornament of Clear Realization. So the Buddha manifests these enlightened activities from his holy mind, and we also understand that we have the potential for the manifestation of these activities in our minds as well. And so if we think about it in this way, our study and practice of the Dharma is actually our kind of similitude, something similar to that enlightened activity. So we could say we do possess a little bit of aspects of enlightened activity, and that enlightened activity that we possess is our efforts to study and practice the Dharma.
the taki goche no the she tapani somo.
In short, we must arrive at the heartfelt, it's not a convision, it's a conviction, at a heartfelt conviction that just as bodhicitta arises in dependence on the guru, twofold bodhicitta can also develop based on harm doers and suffering, and these are therefore equivalent.
Oh, tati kan tangi sa wa chin ti song.
Mhm.
Ta jowa cheba che sojo ni che jengen lo de jowa na sa.
So Geshe thinks we talked about that already, so that should be clear. So next we come to the next outline, action. The root of the text refers to the practice of accumulation and purification that transforms adversity.
Oh, ta zawa no le yin jowa je de ta ji chu o sa tan de no la lo jun no la zawa no la ya re la ma cheba no la ya ka wa yin de chu chi mo ti yo was.
And so we'll see a quote from the root text of the 7-point Lojo mind training. The fourfold practice is the best of methods. And not only do we find this in the Lojong text, but we also find it in other important texts. For example, the Lama Chupa, the offering to the spiritual teacher liturgy.
Oh, ta de jing an zo le tong bo ne mo bo chi zo zo yo re la ta ni wo ne be jan chi she thoya chu chu re ma do she ma thoya tri ga ma res yo wa je se ate.
And so within these, actually, these are all accessible things that we can do, right? Like right now, where we're at right now. There's nothing that's impossible for us.
Oh, ta te ta tong bo te re yo wa ji ne tong bo chu sa bi yo wa.
And so the first of these four, you'll see the subheading they've put here, the accumulation of merit, the accumulation of merit.
Da la dungan shu wa na dungan de me na ga te nyo be so ban ju wi ti che che dungan me de ji de wan de na. Ha ko so.
Yep. That was-
Oh, yeah, de wan de na chu so shi bi da yin ji nyo ba shi ba la ji la.
So when suffering befalls you and you think how joyful you would be were the suffering to disappear, contemplate the following. Not wanting to suffer but wishing to be happy is a sign that one must accumulate the causes of happiness.
Oh, ta ngan zo ta li do sel kang ye shu wa yin kang ye te me na nyo me so se ngan zo kang li wa re ji ba re de mo was.
And this is like a normal thing, right? Whenever we experience a mental or a physical disturbance or suffering, it's very natural to think like, wouldn't it be nice if I wasn't experiencing this?
Oh, pe ga la ma ke da chen bo chi su ba re. Ane me kim ba tra ma yin na yo.
Yeah.
Me me ba.
Yeah.
Ba tra ma yin na yo.
Yeah.
Ha ko sa
How
ra.
goes it?
Ane Korea juju ma juju so ga was.
Mhm.
Oh, de che de ju de ya res.
They would say the good, right?
Oh, de wa ga tian da lo ju
Yeah.
de ya res.
Yeah, so there is an example that even a person who does not possess sight, they move back and forth frequently, just in the same way that also an ant moves back and forth frequently. So all of these different types of beings, all this energy of activity is only trying to achieve happiness.
Oh, ta kumba yo ke ma ze kumba me ke mba mo bon di was. Kumba me ke sen che.
Yeah.
De ji u yan ro ma no koro zu jan ji ndo ya re.
Yeah.
De u de o koro de wa ten da ji de wa ji ke ten da lo ya me.
가만히는 강가 여기니 어찌 가르쳤었대나?
mi ta te che to ko ta jo wo ji ro ku wa me na.
So those sentient beings who are homeless, like those ants who have to wander back and forth, they are doing this only for happiness.
Oh, ta ma do tan do yin ta se chen bo re de ju ya ndo man do nga zu ka sal ta wa yin ten da de wa ji ten da lo te ya re.
And we see beings, human beings, also different types of animal beings and so forth, also going back and forth, engaging in all these activities. This is just because of that striving for happiness.
Oh, ta ting yin de wa yin ta nga do wa mai za ka zo ga re se re ta cho sa ga re. So ta ti ke cha re stand.
But right now, right, we are in our human form. So we have access to accumulate the cause of happiness. So what do we need to do? We need to accumulate merit.
Oh, lama ke chu ki cheba pi nga zo mo mo ya ro was. Gen de shi cheba nong ke cha che cheba mo wo ke cha ta le so. Gen de ge nye go ju bo go to ma la so ban do na ling wa yi sin je go ne chu sa ba lan be ne shan ro se se sha de. Lama ke chu la men da pho la so ba twa de ta ne. Lu jin de ge wa.
Yeah,
Da na wa le na wa shin je lo ta so. Sipa le na sipa shin je lo ta so. Cho wa le na cho wa shin je lo ta so shi re to ngo pe so wa da bo.
So where are we? Yes. So we must make offerings to the guru and the 3 jewels. venerate the Sangha, and offer tormas to the elemental spirits. In short, we must put our energy into gathering the accumulations physically, verbally, and mentally. We should take refuge, generate bodhicitta, make mandala offerings to the Guru and 3 jewels, and pray to them fervently, without any hope or fear, stating, if it is better for me to be sick, bless me with sickness. If it is better for me to be healed, bless me with recovery. If it is better for me to die, bless me with death.
다 조사야 다 시세나 문제더니 개쪽이 실리아 쳐와비야. 마초월 마다 점바도 들리게 다 녀래자 다 내서 뭐 보여.
So just talking about the offerings here, right? The basis for the accumulation of offerings can be the 3 jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, but also it's very beneficial to make offerings to those who are poor, destitute, and so forth, right? This is also a type of generosity.
어다티다 다이나였더니 뭐게 샤야가 lum바다 만다들이 신데 뭐 로산디와 신데 주지스마도 마비가 이나요. 소소 끊어 자첨보 어다 som바 자첨보 같은 피와 이나 어느 오다 거 누구야 매바데
So actually, for example, these days there's many wars and conflicts in the world, right? So we may have donated some financial resources to help the people who are suffering in those parts of the world. If we do that with this type of motivation, this kind of selfless motivation, then even if we just give a small amount, that act of generosity can be the basis of a continuous accumulation of merit.
달려니 어떤 지리들 스타네 다 니브 소소 니바 할레비 니바 첨보 요나 아니 원소 개쫄 소와 때지됐다니 나는 야간데 나와쇼 아니 다 만나는 셈보데는 야간데는 셈보데바쇼 신의 야간데는 쇼와쇼
And so the high level practitioner, right, on the basis of that accumulation of merit, if you're high level, you dedicate to whatever is best for your practice. You leave it in the hands of the enlightened beings and the teacher. And you say, if it's better for me to get healed from this, let me be healed. If it's better for me to be ill, I'll remain ill. If it's better for me to pass away, I'll pass away, right? We have that kind of trust. And also, we understand that people pray to the enlightened beings for those who are realized, right? Doing this without malice. They also hope that those who are terribly harming others, right, that they might have a shorter lifespan to mitigate that harm. And so we talked about the accumulation of merit. And as we come to page 10, we talk about the second of these 4, and this is the purification of negative activities. And so, we could explain this through the explanation of the 4 opponent powers. So Geshe said there's not a lot of time to go into these 4, so we might have to do a complete presentation later. But first we have this awareness that any karma that we've accumulated, right, this can act as an unwholesome potential in our mind that can stay even for, hundreds of years, long periods of time until it ripens. And we also understand that unwholesome karma, in terms of what it arises from, it can arise from one of 2 bases. I think that's the plural of basis, from one of 2 bases. And so there's just 2 that are given here. One basis is Buddhas, and the other basis is sentient beings. So if the negative karma, right, is arising on the basis of Buddhas and sentient beings, then it makes sense that to clear away the negative karma, the antidote is somehow going to involve Buddhas and sentient beings as well. And the holy beings state that it's just the same principle. Like if we fall onto the ground, we also have to push ourselves back up using the ground as the basis, right? So we talk about the upper basis. So the upper basis would be the Buddha. So for example, if we accumulate a negativity on the basis of that then the antidote would become, for example, for refuge. Going for refuge can be an antidote to that negativity.
다 마세나 뭐디 다 senjala 때는 용이 디피레 간디치나요. 아니 쇼바도 니들 쇼주제 세곤발라 때는 다 봐. 정화서 그거래스.
And in terms of the lower basis, right? So that would be the basis of the sentient beings. Then if we accumulate negativity on the basis of the sentient beings, we have to do something that on the basis of sentient beings as the antidote. So that's the practice of love, compassion, bodhicitta, and so forth.
다 쇼주제 세 좋아요. 그때 다 누가도 들리나 다 쇼주제 세 배치도야래. 대민바이나 쇼바치 뭐 이제 전부 다 가제 배치도나 소소라바 두아스.
So of course, the very most supreme antidote to purify that negativity connected with sentient beings is bodhicitta. But maybe if we're not able to bring forth that bodhicitta, also meditation on great love, great compassion, and so forth is very powerful.
엉겨벌러 가서 시디노라 수송아스. 아니 어다 다와 띵바가 까바 노지 다와 띵바도 다와 노지 다
And the analogy that that Nagarjuna gives in his text letter to a friend is like a moon that is obscured by clouds, and then those clouds are cleared away. That is like one who purifies. So we don't need to just have the regret and then just stay there saying, oh, I did some sort of negative or sinful activity. I'm definitely kind of like a failure and so forth. We don't need to think like that, because there are many ways, right, that we can purify that. We just need to engage in the activities. So with a brave and courageous attitude, then there are many methods where you can use to clear away those negativities and to purify them. So now we turn back to our text. So yeah, so we're not, sorry, we go to our other text, which is the text of the 400 verses. So for those of you who are following, I think Manoshi was kind enough to put up a translation on our website. So we are in chapter 12, and chapter 12 starts with verse 276, but 난소 가오였단다. Chupa Sena. Yeah, so we are at 281. We are at 281. Those who find it hard to see this world are ignorant of others. Those who follow them will be misled for a very long time.
아니 가서 손지도 다 현지 선바소 지선도네 다 로저도 말레체 다 할레비트니 가와서 못 가서 말이네. 이네 그게 시왕가마트 깔레모보 자유게 또 뭐요.
So this is actually an indication that for us to be able to follow in the direction under the guidance of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas is something that is supremely fortunate. So it means that we've created causes, we've done good things in the past to have this opportunity.
다 데레마도 어느 시부터 봐 이세케 개바 이세케 언도 멀린들 뭐 쉬어라 왔어. 하고서로 다 대지 이세케 대지 니네 전는 이대로 봐. 넘벌린디 내서 대고 저 가르라 때는 쉬어라. 제 가르라 때는 쉬어라. 건서 시워치 통야 말이야.
But not everyone is able to do this. Even people in the world who we might consider knowing or wise, they are not following the correct sort of view. And so in this way, they're not even able to understand things about like the causes that lead to the various arising of the things in the world and so forth. So one scientific view that Geshe is refuting here is that the scientific view of that this world or even this universe could be born of one cause, that there's like a single cause behind it all. So that's a mistaken view, right? But it's a mistaken view that many people are convinced of, and many people will follow those who are propounding this view. So they're like led in the wrong direction. And so the danger here is that one can fall into that mistaken view now, but also one can create the causes to fall into that mistaken view repeatedly in future lifetimes. Yeah, so also when we talk about things like past and future lives, for example, we understand that these were truths that were taught by the Buddha, but don't mistakenly think that the Buddha created or invented past and future lives. This is just the way things are, right? This is just how things are. It's just that the Buddha was able to explain that. And in fact, right, if it was taught, if it was just something that was said, but it had no basis in reality, we're not compelled to accept it, are we? So if it's something completely not in accord with reality, even if a being that we call the Buddha says it, if it's not in accord with reality, we aren't required to accept it. And that's why we'll find as we come to the study of the Buddhist sutras, for example, we talk about sutras that are interpretable and sutras that are definitive. So it becomes more complex.
Yeah.
The unwise take no delight in letting their mind follow a guide who has done that which is most difficult, attaining nirvana. So the Buddha propounded the places we're trying to reach. We're trying to reach liberation, realization of bodhicitta, Buddhahood, but there are many who are not going to want to follow a path that leads to that. And people might think when we talk about liberation, that means that we have to completely abandon samsara, completely abandon cyclic existence and also the afflictions, the kleshas, thinking, there's no way that I can do that. Forget that. That's not possible. Even if you tell someone just one instruction, like, for example, to abandon attachment, it's like, why would I want to abandon attachment, right? Like, how does that make sense? This is something a lot of people would object to. And then, of course, as beginners, right, we can't abandon attachment or striving to all kind of worldly things, because certain of those things, right, we're going to need to keep us going. So there has to be some differentiation here, discernment. Yep. So it's said that actually, in terms of following the Buddha's instructions completely, it's really only a being who already has some realization that's going to be able to do that joyfully. Geshe said that he wouldn't go that far, that one has to be a holy being, but certainly he would say that there has to be some sort of imprint or potential, right, to take a liking for those teachings. And also, if we hear, for example, that one needs to be able to accumulate 3 incalculable eons of merits in order to become a Buddha, many people might think, oh, like that sounds way too hard. Don't want to do that, right? And so there's also, stories. It's possible that it happens that someone who newly arises bodhicitta, then they're engaging in the bodhisattva's activities, but seeing how pernicious, how difficult and naughty sentient beings are, they think, oh, there's no way that I'm going to be able to help all of these sentient beings, and they lose that bodhicitta resolve, right? This is also something that's mentioned. Geshe is just reflecting that there's many stories related to this, but he thinks one might even involve a Shariputra, right? One of the Buddha's closest disciples, if he's not mistaken.
깨져셔야 돼. 이제 던딜라 때는 뭐 그때 다 레로가 슈치고 관내바시는 다 바직 슐티노.
And so also one thing that can stop us from entering into those paths and going towards those things is, of course, laziness, right? Laziness can be a tremendous obstacle in terms of being able to follow that and to complete that.
단디슐로가 제바되는 때만 먹어야 다 생각해야 보증도에 있어.
And so then the next one Geshe said is a very, very kind of entertaining shloka, entertaining verse.
마토 토빠 멋져대 토나 노그 대돈저 디나 녜빠 주제지 실라 더니 토빠 제바샤.
Yeah. So when it is not seen, fear does not begin. When it is seen, it stops completely. Thus, one can say with certainty, those who know a little are afraid.
This one, 다 나로서 다 요아쇼 porque 다 세야진도야 세 것이야 레바 것이야 요아쇼 tel라 다 tum바니 다자 체슈지도야.
So the very best method by which we can activate and we can most effectively use our mind, right? This is the profound teaching of emptiness.
다 이나이 곧 배도 전부 자 전부 던지고 다 니빠 전부 지래 되는 이나이 될 따져서 또 마시나 요 거럽게 지바 유명하게 내서 지고 뭐 지는 거야.
And so that teaching of profound emptiness is extremely beneficial, but if one does not know how to kind of examine, evaluate, and discern that emptiness correctly, it can be something that is very frightening. It arises fear.
단디 카드들 자자 토제 준비거든요. 빼요 보지 준비하래스.
So
자자를 뭐지?
So an example to illustrate this point was given by the great Gyalse Rinpoche. So Gyalse is one of the sort of two principal disciples of Lama Tsongkhapa, right?
다 빼니 뭐 가르친 거 알았어요. 빼나 롱버치 뇽바치 알았어.
Yeah.
다티마다.
말이 튀기요.
야야야. 빼나 롱버치 뇽바치를 머서가 셰나스.
Yeah.
머송.
미숨. Yeah.
하고 살아와. 아니 멋지 할래 셰기요 알았어.
Yeah.
멋지 때는 셰기요 말았어.
미숨바?
하고 살아와. 다 간데서 다 무시기 될 문인이와. 다
말이 셰겐니니도.
다 알듯이야. 아니 문용바지 알았어.
디숨바.
다 알았으면 문용바지.
도서.
롱바지 셰게다라. 문용바디 롱바지 셴바이니 코체는 셰기요 말에. 셴노요 말에.
야, 뇽바디.
뇽바데.
야.
코셰도 셰기요 말았어.
So there's an example that is the example that's given here is the example of a crazy elephant. And in terms of the people who are interacting with this mad elephant, there are three. And so the first two, one of them is very scared, and the second one is not scared at all. And the second one, it is said that he is not fearful at all, or she is not fearful at all of the mad elephant because they are a little bit crazy. So because they are not of sound mind, they don't realize what the danger is. So because of that kind of madness, right? They don't know how to be afraid. You know, they can see the elephant kind of doing all kinds of crazy things, but they won't be fearful of it at all.
다 롱버치는 또 걷다 카파 콜 내가 가르쳐거나 때 도케 시기 내가 차소 시기지나 그 롱버치 시험바이는 콜 시험을 요 말했어
알레
키 롱버치 가와이나 파티 도야 왔어.
But then there could be another person, and he or she is a skilled elephant trainer, and they know all of the things that they need to do to subdue the elephant. And so therefore they are maybe a little bit apprehensive, but not completely fearful.
So the
trainer will know that, okay, the first thing that you need to do to get the elephant to calm down is this. And then once the elephant is calm, the way to kind of lead it on a path away from the scene is like this. They know how to do all of that. Yeah. And so he is the one who has the reasoned lack of fear, right? The reasoned lack of fear of the elephant. Yeah. So but the person who is of sound mind and sees that crazy elephant but lacks the skills necessary to subdue it. That is the person who is going to have like that real fear. Yeah.
다 빼대 대대 여바 노지.
Mhm.
tumbanyen lo shike telayo. Riso yung yares.
And so similarly, those who are approaching the study of profound emptiness are of three types.
다 거친 tumbanyen 소화 체코 메게 다 그냥 다 지진이 간서 가와래 됐던 다야로 왔어.
Yeah, so we can see which of these three we sort of fit into.
다 가서 자자바 이나 코토와 메게 지나.
Yeah.
So
the first person, you might be talking to him or her about emptiness, but they just have no feeling at all. Like maybe they're even a little bit bored. So hearing about emptiness certainly isn't going to scare that person if they're completely uninterested, right?
나도 봐주세요. 안전을 세줄리와 이는 콜 대원매에서 많이 거와. 쉐마줄리와 이는 대원매에서 많이 거
And this is like the other analogy of if we take like a cow or a yak, it doesn't matter if we pour either sand or gold dust into its ear. It's going to shake its head to get rid of it because it wants to get rid of that sensation, right?
다용 tumban이 그런 다도 차서 하고 계시나. 요 tum반이를 가서 손으로 또 그런 지바 용비와 말해. So
the second person, they have already studied emptiness extensively and they have some experience of it. So they know exactly how that emptiness unfolds. So similarly, upon hearing about emptiness, they will not be terribly fearful. But the person who has maybe a great feeling or appreciation for the teaching of emptiness, but doesn't have a very sound understanding of it, that person could also, that person will experience maybe some type of fear.
And that
third type of person we're still seeing as, you know, it's kind of a good thing, actually. We're not dismissing that person. So in the past, of course, when practitioners were receiving teachings on emptiness, they might spend some time receiving those teachings, and then often they would go into the caves or other isolated places to meditate upon what they had heard. And so one Lama was teaching a group of disciples in this way, but then when the next session of teaching started, he noticed that a monk was missing from the retreat. And so he was wondering, like, why didn't that person come back? So he went to the cave to look for him, and he saw him holding on to the side wall of the cave. And when the Lama saw that, actually, far from being displeased, he was pleased. He was quite impressed, actually. Yeah. And so thinking that if we look for something, we can't find it on that sort of coarser level, it can seem like there's nothing to hold on to at all. Yeah. And so when it feels like there's nothing there at all, what we have to do is remember there's nothing there that exists inherently. However, there is the relative abiding of things. And so to understand that sort of subtle distinction and a little bit of that paradox, this is not something that is so easy to do. Sorry. Go ne sungdang. Nga yapo koma sung. Tambo tomba ni gom jape kabla. Yep. So I think Geshe is explaining how in times of fear, right, in times when we're experiencing something very fearful, or very difficult, based upon that intense feeling of fear, we can then actually use that as an opportunity to meditate on selflessness and think, where is the self? Where is the I that is experiencing that? And actually, sometimes if we meditate on selflessness, on emptiness in this way, there's many stories of practitioners who were able to get rid of tremendous fear by doing that.
미 저세 가르레스. 단지 말에 바티게 딜 나치 요요하래 되네. 하고 살아. 이나 여기 쫙 나치 파템보선들. 델라 되네. 단요다 강게 템보지죠.
And this comes from that understanding, right? Because when we meditate on that emptiness, we'll be able to see like this ignorance through the lens of the ignorance grasping at the self. There is this I or this self nominally, but through the lens of the ignorance grasping at the self, what we do is we superimpose it being more substantial than it is, like putting a metal suit of armor on top of it.
요 말에 잘라 그때 든지게 더 타보. 쫙 민다고. 근데 따바지 요 말에 세게 강게 강고 데스 렐레 좋아로.
And if we say there is no such self, right, that's seen through that lens of that self-grasping ignorance, that there is no such self, which is like that solid metal self and so forth, then the conception of that self becomes much, much less prominent. And then correspondingly, the fear that that self may be experiencing is greatly diminished.
다 강력의 차이나래 지박의 차이나래 소화도자 노도도자 가르 이나 동봉한테 땜버 쇼보 노아 차게죠.
So the difficulty, the suffering, the problem, or the fear that we experience, because of that first instance, it seems something like very solid, very present, very strong.
다 던지고 내서 댕년에 다메 대도 지바 하고 살아 남의 내서 디딘 걸 파 와도 오냐라 다 땡땡 저거 주사 땡땡 치던디 요 말에 손노돈 다 거기 때 야로야. So
if we contemplate selflessness in those moments and think there seems to be a self that is experiencing this that is pinpointable, but if we look for it, we won't be able to find it. Even just contemplating like that, right? It diminishes that over-exaggerated sense of self, and in that way, the fear can be greatly diminished as well. So any difficulty, illness, and so forth that we experience, it's tough, but if we can apply this, it's very beneficial. But to be able to achieve a stable and effective practice in this, of course, we have to habituate ourselves to it. We have to get used to it. And we have to challenge this habit of the ignorance grasping the self, and connected with that, the self-cherishing that thinks that whatever appearance we see, it exists really in the way that it appears, and sort of like just going with that conception. So there in the text, then we've seen when we're experiencing obstacles or difficult conditions, right, how we can use emptiness to transform about that. We also, in another part of the text, talked about how we can use the method side, love, compassion, and so forth to transform that. So hopefully within that, right, there's some tools that we can use there. And so because we have these many tools, right, we have many reasons to be happy and confident and to proceed in our practice joyfully. So the three analogies and the three examples, these are also kind of interesting ways to think about like how we're approaching the practice, right? That can be kind of fun to think about, to contemplate. Yeah. So we want to have this kind of exploratory, fearless attitude of examining how the mind is, just like a little toddler, like a little child, like they're just going to run around wherever and see what's happening. Even if the place is like a little bit safe or more dangerous, they're willing to kind of look and investigate everything. So we can have that approach. So we can see We can see in this way whether we have feeling for emptiness or not.
야, 뒤에 가비면 뒤에
So let us pause here, and we will do the with a joyful mind the dedications. And of course, if afterwards you need to get on with your day, please feel free. But you can also stick around for questions. Just having had that news, let us also do a short prayer for His Holiness's long life.
Changju zemjo rinpoche amaje banam jeju rechi chewa nyamba meba yang gone gondu bewa reshu tongni tawa rinpoche amaje banam jeju rechi chewa nyamba meba yang Gone gonde beware sho Jambe bao jida gyamba dang gundu Zangpo deyan de jinde de da gungi jesu da lo chir gewa de da tamje ratu go ndusu shebe gyawa tamje ge ngowa ganla chodu ngaba de dagi gewe tsawa di kun kyang Zangpo choji radu ngowa ge Gangri rawe gowe jinkan de pendang dewa malu jongwe ne chenre ziwan tenzin gyalso ye shabe site pardu tengyo chi.
우리 관계기 니발라 때니다 숨지기 싫어하대. 로아르주 생제 가와리나 다 반야트 차타지.
So through the merits of myself and others, and also the blessings of the enlightened beings, may whatever sixth type of sentient being within samsara I encounter, may we all perceive it as being close to us.
리치간에 생제간 간이 지나요 단야트 셔도야지.
May these merits become the cause for any physical or mental suffering of these beings to be completely cleared away.
소소 롱기 든디가 봐. 로아리 두 생제 요즈 다 리치간 생제간 강아 매바조 토야다 보게. 넌이 봐도야 진짜.
May these merits become a cause for myself alone to be able to have the capacity to free all of these beings from their mental and physical suffering. May the sun of happiness shine on all beings with equality. I've been very fortunate to be able to engage in these teachings to develop love, compassion, bodhicitta, and wisdom realizing emptiness. So we'll pause there. Let me just turn our volume up a little bit. Okay, does anybody have questions?
There are several questions coming in from Facebook today.
All right, let's do those first then. Yep.
Okay, first one is a question about breathing. Whenever I do breathing meditation, as soon as I'm aware of my breathing, it is no longer natural, but feels watched, and I feel slightly asphyxiated and need to breathe deeply to settle down. Should I simply control my breath, not practice this, or do this more so that I can relax? Any tips, please?
yeah, di ujaya gi netsu kolare. Nganso rang shingi uja gogire duas. Yine ko ujaya di lamsang sem donang tene, dene ujaya tets kandes laugre. Busu topo dang lung yapo yongyo mares, dene lung loela yapo legi metsang halepe shuk chempo chene ujagores. Di chungdu dene kandes chik chegores. Ganso tets donang tene tets lele chene ujagores di dabo chik dena digires.
말타테 소설 가린데가 요나 대배주도 좋아해. 시도. 우리 첨보자니 라간도나.
Yeah.
어느 쪽 다 중가도 간가시 오샤야 오지세요 아레스.
So in fact, it's just the observation of the breath. So in this particular circumstances, Geshe would advise to, if you need to breathe more deeply, to kind of not feel asphyxiated, then just do that, right? You can just breathe deeply and count that. That's okay.
네 소설 가린데가 요나 더 좋아 대배주도. 다 소설 수인 좋아 또 이서는 오프겐 좀 맞지 뭐야 이제 디가 리지가 돼.
So why he mentioned it like this, why Geshe mentioned it like this though, is because if we start to think, okay, I'm breathing deeply, let's breathe more softly, or I'm breathing too softly, let's breathe more deeply, then you're grasping at changing that breath. And when you start grasping at that, you're no longer mindful of the breath. So that's why he said that. But also this method that we proposed about counting the breaths today, that's one of many methods to kind of prepare our mind, right? It's not the only one. You don't have to use that if it doesn't work for you. There's also a lot of people who may find it more beneficial to kind of breathe in and then to hold that breath. And after holding it, to exhale, and then hold, and then breathe in, right? You can also do the breath like that and count. That's more beneficial for some folks. So just experiment and really see like what works with you in your circumstance. That's totally okay. What we're trying to reduce is the discursive or the projecting thoughts that are distracting us from our meditation. So whichever way of observing the breath helps you to do that, you can use that method. But the problem is that if we get too attached to breathing in a certain way, thinking, I'm breathing too shallow, I want to breathe more deeply. I'm breathing too deeply, I want to breathe more shallow. Then we can have an attachment to like how our breath should be. And that attachment to how it should be can be a distraction. But these various methods of kind of controlling and counting the breath, these are just ways to cultivate, right? So you don't have to worry too much. Yeah. So also to understand, there's no value judgment also on whether the breathing is more shallow or the breathing is deeper. In fact, this breath is a neutral object, right? It's neither inherently wholesome or unwholesome. Yeah. So whether we're breathing softly, the breath as an object remains neutral. And if we're breathing deeply as an object, it remains neutral. It doesn't become positive or negative depending on how we're breathing. So that might be helpful to keep in mind. Yeah. There was another one, right, Dave?
There's two more.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Yep. Another one is there are some Dharma practitioners that using these teachings about the result of Lojong say that practitioners who cannot cure themselves of illness with practice aren't practicing properly. But surely that there may be other causes and conditions for illness and also for not being able to cure illness. Surely not every illness can be cured even if we're extraordinary practitioners. Is the leprosy story just a trick to get us to practice, which can work to physically heal only under certain conditions?
Who's telling you that? Tell them that Kedrup's going to go and have words with them. That is not helpful, right? Anyways, I'm sorry. Let me put the question to Geshe. Yeah, no, Dharma shaming is not a good thing. Anyways, sorry. Let me ask the question to Geshe. Sorry. Mi kashe roa nganso natsa mepa so matubna deni chirong lojong yapo nyamlen chegyo mares. Chirong che nyamlen chegen mares. Roa nampakashi dendela giris, rwa. Deni dela tene semshuk tes cha drogire duas. Ine lojong peshu tang na yang, rwa, natsa le dramandrala tene yongi ure. Samsam mepa so tugire, samsam mepa so tugyo mares, rwa. Deni cherong natsa mepa so tupa metzang cherong lojong yamlen chigyo mares. Di labia yong mares. Yeah, so Geshe said that what those people are saying is meaningless, so don't worry about it. Yeah. The sign of success isn't measured that way, Geshe said. The sign of success is, are we able to use the teachings of transforming adversity into the path to change our mind, to train our mind? It's actually not measured by how the illness unfolds or doesn't unfold. It's measured by how we train our mind. Yeah. And in fact, if people are being judgmental with someone who is sick, this kind of underpins the original principle, which is that we can be lazy or complacent in our practice. And sometimes the illness is actually going to be a catalyst for us to practice better. So remember the story of Ananda, right? He had, I think it was like 2 nephews or 2 relatives anyway, who were monks in the monastery. And one of them was a little bit lazy. So he had to take that one to see the suffering in another realm. And then based upon that, right, he kind of became more determined in his practice. Yeah. And so it said that actually, like, one of the 2 nephews of Ananda who became a monk, he became a monk because he had heard that he had actually seen the Deva realms, and he thought, if you practice morality, you can be reborn in the Deva realms, and the Deva goddesses are super attractive. So I want to be reborn in that realm so I can meet those super attractive goddesses, right? Which is like not the best motivation. Yeah. So if I can get out of this detachment to the desire realm, then I can meet the beautiful goddesses of the form realm, which is like even better than the beauty that we have here, right? So that's not necessarily the best motivation. Yeah. So yeah, just he wants to say that's not how you measure the success, is how the illness is going. You measure it by how the mind is trained. So that would be what Geshe would say about that. There was one more, right, Geshe? Right?
Yeah. Is there a definitive source that lists what sutras are definitive and which provisional? Or is it such a decision is self-provisional and left to the teacher or lineage?
Good question. Nanso trangdun dang ngendun do rik ni res. Do chiki nangle do di trangdun res, do di ngendun res selbo so chiki res, matok jen soso sherab latene, soso gegen latene danke chegores.
Maram tangama suji koro yobe ka tawalda umo nombo yo isa koro si yawashin right this kala khabar was
Trangdun dang ngendun yewache kala kabores.
Boina ngamaina
Ale loso
ta suji magopana
wampo ngumpo sena wampo dulpo chito wampo numpo yewache
nombo isa tidi yawashik koro shekar was
ale loso yeah. So when the Buddha first propounded these sutras, right, a lot of the Buddha's disciples, they were of sharp faculties, right, superior faculties, and therefore they would be able to discern themselves if an instruction was interpretable or definitive.
다 손지가 야와시 워셔요 말해서 세제 머리지는 데 야가 야이자 데 야가 데 지수 리지는 데 야가 데선 지수야 맞는데 도대인데 데 지수야.
And so the Buddha didn't propound a sutra that delineates that. And also we have to understand that the teachings were spoken for what would be most beneficial for that audience. So something that was interpretable could be more beneficial for somebody depending upon their affinity and capacity, right? Whereas something definitive would be more beneficial for someone else. But actually, after the Buddha, during our time, we have tools to be able to discern this. In fact, it's a little bit easier for us in a way.
저세 가르에서나 손지 어느 양열인데네 로지작이 질은 게 뭘로 이사요.
Yeah.
아니 로그작이 질러 파파 도매에서는 문예용 거래. 대니가 도대동인데 여와 셔노 그래서 손지가 녹음을 가.
And so the reason for this, and this was actually prophesized in the sutras, that 400 years after the passing of the Buddha, 900 years after the passing of the Buddha, we have these great figures of the Pandit, Nagarjuna, and Asanga. And in their teachings, they speak about how to identify interpretable and definitive.
어때 대니가 돈이 다 수자에 깨져야 돼. 강가 도대동인데 권이 여와 셔노 그래.
So based upon the teachings of Nagarjuna and Asanga, their texts, right? Then by studying those, we become capable to differentiate between what is interpretable and what is definitive.
다 손지가 녹음을 쓰면 뭐지 로지작이 질은 게 뭘로 앞에 로그작이 질러 파파 도매 편에 권이 여와 따다 셔자기 대지는 이네잖아. 로주서 안 걸추서 살았어.
Younger Sonam?
연mol로도 봐봐 좀 배차네라.
Yeah.
그런 거 졸리라 오서 잘. 그니 여셔 잘 왔어.
Yeah. And so it's actually easy for us because we're in the time after Nagarjuna and Asanga appeared. We actually have all the information we need to know what to take on as interpretable and what to take on as definitive to be able to traverse the path. So we can actually say with confidence, this particular teaching is definitive. This particular teaching is interpretable based upon the instructions of those masters, Nagarjuna and Asanga. So differentiating between the interpretable and the definitive, because we have these tools, it's not so tough. But what's tougher is going to be to actually bring forth that realization of profound emptiness, to bring forth that love, compassion, bodhicitta in our heart, right? That's going to be more difficult. Yeah. So that would be his answer to that question. Was that all of them, Dave?
Yes.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Geshe says when I ask anybody else, he feels like I'm not really asking anybody else. It is a sincere anybody else. Sorry, anybody else? Is that better? Any other questions? Yeah, so Geshe said you don't have to ask questions. He's just kidding, but you don't have to, right? It's up to you. So if not, I guess we can leave it there. So thank you so much, everybody. So, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, this is so how do we know that Nagarjuna and Asanga are definitive?
Yeah, definitely, that's fair. Then nganso the nganso gompo lunju dam papa tome konso gi labia yewache di ngedin res kandes hakotu gires. Konso di ngedin di trangdun labia kandes kelen tu gires. Using the reasonings they outline, we can see within our own mind why something will be definitive and why it will be interpretable. So we cultivate those instructions, but mainly we're using our own mind, our own intelligence, actually. So actually, this is who we rely on, but the process of really determining it is up to us, right? Because we'll be exposed to different kinds of teachings, right? For example, we'll have the mind only, the Chittamantran view. And then the people that are holding that view, they'll say that like this sutra is definitive or interpretable. And then the people following Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, and so forth, they'll say the middle way view and the sutras that are teaching that are definitive. So we eventually we have to kind of apply the instructions and come to basically an understanding, a certainty in our own mind.
민인데 내가 자그래 저를 주지 봐도 세점에 따가든 얘네서 많이 그랬는데 그랬대. 내가 시어 말했어.
So,
Adhidharma.
so Chandrakirti said, that like we're not holding this because this is a sutra where the Buddha said this, but we're holding this because with examination, this reflects reality. Chandrakirti also said in the Madhyamakavatara that I'm going to propound the ultimate middle way view, and it is not my intention to disparage the view of others. That's not my intention, but through expounding this, those views will be cleared away.
다 단다이네 당안 좋이지 말했어. 단니까지 니야가 나와 뒤에 배도 체가 늘 선택을 하지. 고도절로 하고 있어.
And also, like we'll see in our own experience, there'll be certain times where a particular view might actually be more beneficial for us just in terms of the practice, even though it's not the ultimate. So basically we trust in those teachers because it was like through this differentiation and practice that they came to the conclusion.
다 메디 따다 제마스마도 세점비 따와롱 거를 보여 배도 체가 인 거야 아이자. 따와 다도도 단지 따와 되랬더니 이나 니까지 나는 디파트먼트 만두 소노 돈에라.
좀 봐보 하고 나서.
매매라 시바 돈바티 메디 제마스.
Yeah.
시바 돈바지 요아. 세점비 따와 배도 체가 이자. 니까지 가로 되냐래서는 되게. 미네 야쇼도 단지 따와래 손시 요아스 거를.
So Geshe is reflecting on one practitioner. He can't remember the name of this person, but they were thinking that, okay, like based on reasonings, we understand that the Madhyamika, the middle way view, is supreme. But right now, for my mind, in terms of what's most effective for my mind and its transformation, it's the Chittamantra, the mind-only view. So I'm going to take some time to cultivate that, even understanding that the Madhyamika view may be superior.
And then you
have other people, though, who do accept that this Chittamantra, the mind-only view, this is expressing the ultimate. What it says is definitive, and then going according with that understanding. So we understand we want to discern that view that is the ultimate, but in terms of when you're working with your mind, whichever of those Buddhist philosophical views you see helps you to work with your mind and to kind of cultivate it, you can definitely use that. Yeah, so there's something more I guess I wanted to say with that, but he'll tell it another time.
Yeah, it is.
Good, yeah.
Oh, yeah, so
Right.
So
So thank you, everybody. Tashi Dele from Geshe, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. If you're around, we will see you next Sunday, same time.
yeah.